I'm not sure if, let's see up
Good
here.
morning. Assalamu alaikum.
Good
Thank you
morning,
for tuning
everyone.
in. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, but we are
We are
in
persevering.
here. That's what the Mamdani effect does, right? So we're
That's
going
the
to blame it on
Mamdani
that.
effect. Alhamdulillah.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us live today. We're here to talk about Mamdani in New York, his recent win as mayor of New York City, and kind of what that means to Arab and Muslim educators and just folks across the board, even if you're not in education, but we are in education, so we're really centering that sector, um, especially in a society where Islam and Muslims are often misunderstood and targeted, and brutalized, right? So that's also a reality. So this is a space for reflection. It's a space for lived experience, and it's a space for community. So not debate. We're just going to be reflecting as Arab and Muslim educators. And it's myself, Jehan Hakim, and I am from California, Bay Area, born and raised, but I currently live in Houston, Texas. And then we have Dr. Shireen. Shireen Soliman, who is from New York, but is originally from Egypt. She's a professor at, and I'll cue you.
Assalamu alaikum, sister. Thank you. We've been talking about doing this for a little while. Alhamdulillah, I think it is a really important time for us to just take a few moments to kind of to debrief and to deconstruct what's, what are the implications of this moment. So I'm not Doctora Shireen, but I am Professor Shireen. I teach at Parsons and Pratt School of Fashion here in New York City. So I'm originally from Astoria, and that's the district where Zohran Mamdani was our assembly person. So, I mean, I don't know if we can kind of like jump right in, but I have to do a disclaimer because I have experience with Mamdani, the politician. I will have to say he's not my favorite politician. And that's why we're calling this the Mamdani effect. Not about Mamdani himself, and not about maybe particularly why or what the politics on our end is like. But for me, who's been impacted, I recognize, he was our assembly person here in Astoria. Astoria is an incredibly diverse. Queens, New York is the most diverse area, really one of the most in the planet. And so it wasn't really, I don't remember it being so shocking or, consequential that he was the assembly person for such a diverse district. But when he gets launched into the public spotlight on a global stage, that effect is real. And so it's not necessarily Mamdani the politician, and I've got beef with, some of the, local, very, very local granular things, but it's really about what he represents. And as you said, it's not really necessarily just for Arabs and Muslims, but it's for people, anyone in the education space, and more broad as well, families, students at large, right? So thinking about moving from, more abstract and rather more concrete and granular to more abstract. Mamdani in this pivotal time represents hope. He represents inclusion and belonging. He represents the longing for change, for equity, for justice. He represents a shift where people feel seen. And it's not necessarily that, only Muslims feel seen, but I think it's people in general who have been used to being invisible. And so, he was able to mobilize in New York City history, I think one of the most, if not the most, large people powered movements on such a scale that I think New York has never seen. He was able to mobilize younger voters under 30, which have been, off the scale. He's been able to mobilize immigrants. He's been able to mobilize the aunties and the uncles and everybody at the masajid who are going around, and people who are really feeling like they had ownership, that New York actually belongs to all of us. He represents that shift. And I think, I'll just close by saying it's not even just necessarily the Mamdani effect, Zohran, but it's really about the Mamdanis. And I don't want to overlook that, it is consequential, it has parents, Mira Nair and Mahmoud on a global stage, what they represent in terms of, intellectuals, artists, and obviously a nod to his wife, Rama Duaji, who is an artist. Again, too, I have, other, viewpoints, but I'll just say that, for people in the cultural sector, cultural workers, artists like ourselves, that matters, seeing artists and academics and scholars and people who are thinking, people who are critiquing, people who have that moral courage, it matters.
And she's Syrian American also. So that also, when we talk about representation, I think those pieces matter. So I guess you
And
kind of
she's Gen
laid it
Z.
out.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
She's Gen
right.
Z. And that's also part of the story. Go ahead.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess, you laid out kind of what we're doing here today. Today, we're talking about the Mamdani effect, whether you're from New York or California like me or anywhere else. I think the effect of having someone so unapologetic, openly Muslim, and is not backing down when it comes to foreign policy is something that is affecting us all in a way. So I guess the first question is like, what did that moment, why did it feel important to you personally, Shireen?
I think that, thinking about, like I said, my personal, what's happening on, 31st Avenue and, but it's really more about, what was revealed on this broader global stage. And it's not to say that we don't have prejudice or Islamophobia in our, idyllic world of Queen's Astoria, but to see like the unfettered, rabid Islamophobia, to see like the unabated hate, truly, like just very, very dark, on just out in the open, explicit, hateful rhetoric, and just to see that the response to that revealed, unfortunately, ignorance of basic civics. Right? Like, how can you, like the idea of like deporting someone who, has been here since they were, I mean, I don't know, we're seeing all kinds of things that we never imagined we would see, but, to deport someone because they might have a different opinion, to harm or abuse or to violently attack, to harm people, this is what we're seeing. And so I think this kind of brought out something that was, I mean, we all kind of knew, but, this is something that we saw, that it was just unabashed. It was shocking. I mean, I think that what it meant for me too was, that it represented like a tipping point, in terms of, what does that look like when people actually feel part of a system, when people feel seen. Maybe we're seeing a little bit too much. He's from Astoria, so he's kind of like all of our every single restaurant I go to, he's blasting all over social media. So maybe he's making us feel seen too much. But there's just something sort of empowering there. And if I'm the age that I am, and I feel those little moments of pride, maybe beyond that, I think I'll take it to my children and the night that he won. And we, here in Astoria, we went out on Steinway Street, and it was very younger generation celebrate and feel proud of who they were, and to make noise and to be loud and to take up space and to be able to imagine. I think, maybe I will say, maybe I'll wrap up by saying, maybe my hope doesn't come from Mamdani himself, but again, what he represents. And I get hope from their hope.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think it's really about that. I think that's what we've needed for so long. And I think for me, Mamdani's win hit me on a very like emotional level as an Arab, a Muslim in my mid 40s who wears hijab, and I've lived through decades of being told directly and systemically that people like me are not they're not always only on the margins of this country, but we're treated like our identities are inherently brutal and barbaric. Um, every foreign policy concerning Arabs and Muslims has been militarized ever since 9/11. So, and this is on the ground and abroad. So growing up in inner city of San Francisco and Oakland and the Bay Area is kind of similar to New York in a way where we're very diverse, very politically motivated, socially engaged. Black Panthers movement started, you know, there. And but even with all that, there's still a lot of anti-Arab, anti-Muslim bigotry, hate, and racism. That's sort of like, you know, covered up under you know, identity politics or polite, you know, being polite.
Hmm.
So, you know, being a teacher and a community organizer, I've seen a lot of, you know, whether it's the Muslim ban or say surveillance or just teachers talking about being Arab or Muslim under the umbrella of terrorism, you know, or fear and things like that. So then, so to have this young Muslim, unapologetically Muslim man, young man, be unapologetic about his Islam and about his policies, and especially his views on Palestine, it
Hmm.
was really just very like we felt seen because I'm speaking for a lot of people in my community, a lot of friends and colleagues and
Hmm.
other educators. And it was like recognition, you know, like our pain, our resistance and our persistence, it mattered, you know what I mean? So, and that it, like you said, like hope, continue to have hope because I think there is a lot of hope surrounding Mamdani. So, yeah, I mean, it was just like Muslim Americans are now given the opportunity to be carriers of peace and justice in the way that we truly are. Do you know what I mean? So I'm
Yeah.
really hopeful for Mamdani, and I think that's what it's meant to me. So moving on, like, what does this win say about like belonging and visibility for Muslim communities?
I think that, you know, there's a lot to kind of unpack there. I think that for you and I as educators, thinking about, depending on, you know, our different levels, for you with your expertise in the K through 12 area, and then for me looking at higher ed, you know, I think that age appropriate conversations, you know, can be having in terms, so it's a kind of a broad question, but I think let's meet in the middle, right? So let's just say sometime around young adult, teen years, those age groups, those are psychologically, neuropsychologically, those are like the peak periods in our life. That's when our identity formation is happening. And so for people, as they're developing their sense of self, by extension, for them to be able to have like a sense of what is possible, a sense of, you know, what is the difference between, you know, to just be in a space the only one, like I constantly find myself the only one, you know, in a space for so many parts of my intersectional identities, but to move from being the only one token to what does substantive representation mean? What does it mean to be uncompromising, as you said, unapologetic, and to disrupt the narrative of fear? I mean, the thing is, again, too, without going into my particular politics, but I think it was evident on a world stage, you know, the other candidates ran on fear-based campaigns. They were terrifying people, you know, to try to get their vote. You know, like if you do this, imagine, you know, what will happen. And I mean, you could even quote all of the madness that we saw and heard. But his was an uplifting message, something that people are yearning for. And so, as you said, I think, you know, when we think about how does that culture, how does his culture and his religion impact his leadership style? What does it mean when your all of your work, your service-based work, is informed by your faith? And so to start to decouple Islam from the fear-based, the terror-based narratives, from Islam being at its core a religion of social justice. I think that that's, you know, in terms of belonging, be able to appear as yourself in a space fully you, and to change that perception. I think it's, yeah, I mean, it's pivotal.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think when I think about belonging and visibility for Muslim communities, just in general, as I'm in my mid 40s again, I think what it means to belong as a Muslim and an Arab in this society has meant it's only been through the lens of crisis or fear,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of like shrink and invisibilize yourself, and not be very vocal or speak up. So I think that this win or this the effect from Mamdani's win, rather I should say, is well, like you said, allows for that narrative to be reframed in a way that we haven't seen before, because we have Muslims in places of power.
Hmm.
And you know, and I'm not gonna forget to mention Rashida Tlaib or like Ilhan Omar.
Hmm. Hmm.
And there
Yeah.
are others across the country. Alhamdulillah, congratulations to them. Other Muslim Americans that have won, and they do have, you know, positions of power. But the way that Mamdani was uh, you know, racialized, and the way he was profiled, and the way he was demonized, like you said, on a global level, was really scary to see. And it's kind of like a reminder of what it looked like after 9/11. But he was so, you know, I keep saying unapologetic, like he stood 10 toes down. And
Hmm.
it was amazing the campaign that he ran. So anyways, I say all this to say is that visibility here isn't symbolic, you know, it's structural. So we like Mamdani's effect, or his win, it challenges the idea that Muslims can only exist on the sidelines of democracy, right? Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
it tells our elders and those who've endured decades of erasure, and our youth, that you know, they're still forming their sense of self, their
Hmm.
identity, and that they're not outsiders looking in. You know, like, you belong here fully, unapologetically. So Mamdani's effect is that representation that our youth have always, you know, that they've needed, and
Yeah.
it's only the beginning.
Yeah. I think that, going back and kind of circling around again, how does this impact Muslims in particular, but then how does it impact all of those around us, and the importance of allyship. And so in the face of that hate, because it's not, we experience it obviously through the lens of anti-Muslim hate because of who we are, but then we can recognize it in other forms of hate, very, very dangerous hate around, simply around, discrimination for all kinds of possible identities, experiences, perceptions. So we're seeing that now, exponentially. So like, what's the importance of allies? And so again, we can even take it down to like, let's go back down now to the elementary school level. Like, what's the importance of allyship, and standing up to bullies, right? And so, Mamdani didn't do anything in a vacuum. His messaging was sharp. He understood and he knew, I think probably from a lived experience, what it felt like to be marginalized and to not be used to people talking to you. So when his messaging to his audiences, he was doing messaging in multiple languages. I don't know if he's like how many languages he actually speaks fluently, but to make an effort to speak to different communities in their own language, that shows an empathy. It shows an awareness of like what that experience must be like for them, to maybe have to, juggle, multiple languages, code switching. And he really modeled that. And so again, too, how can we recognize the role of, as us as educators, as you said, thinking about like a system. These are not things that happen organically, as we keep saying, like, it's intentional, that these are the rhetoric of fear, the rhetoric of hate. And so how can we kind of recognize it? I think you said something too, where things were sort of, not as explicit, the microaggressions. In this case, it exploded and became like the macroaggressions, but even those subtle veiled microaggressions, these are opportunities for educators, to really bring in that nuance, for their
Right.
students. Mm-hmm.
So then the question remains is, specifically, how can educators use this moment as a teaching moment, for fellow faculty, in your case probably, or
Mm-hmm.
for fellow students? Like, what are things that can be done in the classroom, that can be teaching moments, moments of healing?
I think, again, too, we can kind of vacillate between Islamophobia or anti-Muslim hate. The more I keep using Islamophobia, it's because that is sort of the accepted term. But if, I think what I'll say is one thing that we can do, especially for high school and college age level, right, is again, too, that critical thinking and to start to parse out nuance. And so Islamophobia, as opposed to, anti-Muslim hate, phobia is a fear of Muslims, right? So even the use of the word Islamophobia, but these so many words in our language and our lexicon, so many words we are repeating without really kind of thinking about what are the consequences, what are the context, why do we use this language, what does a certain term mean for some people while it means a different thing for other people, and kind of understanding different points of view, understanding, like I said, that nuance, understanding, how to think in systems thinking, right? And so nothing is happening out of a vacuum. And so like who stands to gain through the anti-Muslim hate? This is an agenda. It's been happening, I can't even say from 9/11. It happened obviously before that, led up to 9/11. So, all of our adult lives, for me, again, too, I'm, older, but for all of an adult life. But I always kind of come back to this saying, it wasn't until 9/11 I woke up the next day and now my new identity was Muslim American. And before I was just me, right? But to have to be like Muslim American, to hyphenate, to kind of attach, to say I can be both things, like that kind of discourse. And so continuing to familiarize ourselves with history and context and systems. That's what we can do on higher ed level.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for naming that. I think for the younger crowd, the younger educators, one very easy thing to do is like name the truth, like speak on it, be honest, be real, name the anti-Muslim hate, name the anti-immigration policies, name the exclusion without sugarcoating it, and also we can hold space for what's happening in this moment, whether it's like collective hope or collective joy. Healing doesn't come from pretending that it didn't happen, right? So like it comes from acknowledging it and showing students that resistance and progress are possible. And it's a moment to teach civic engagement in a way that is critical, like you said, critically thinking with real, accurate historical context. And I know that for those of us who have worked in public schools, we still follow the McGraw-Hill curriculum, which is out of Texas. And we know that history is rooted in erasure and, glossing over the Atlantic slave trade and the role of the indigenous and how they were annihilated. So educators can and should be honest and be radically honest, and affirm students' identities, and especially for Arab and Muslim students, like they've been dealing with this for so long. This hate, the micro and the macro aggressions. It's a chance to say that your story belongs in the classroom and not just in the footnotes. It's not something we're going to just kind of like, mention briefly, like this is a pivotal moment, not just for Arab and Muslim community, but just for people of color generally. And I think if this reminds me a little bit of that moment when Obama won back in 2008, we were all very, very like hopeful and excited. Obviously he let us down. He disappointed us. And he used two terms to deport millions of people and expand the war on terror. So while Mamdani's win is, there's a lot of hope surrounding it, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So there's a lot of action to be that people are waiting to see.
I think, his ability to be radically honest and the moral courage, again, like I said, I mean, for him to, he named the genocide, and he continues to name that. He continued to stand for the Palestinians' right to liberation. He continued to name what is happening, and that used to be political suicide. For all of these years. It was the thing that was the line. He crossed that line. Imagine the amount of courage that it took for him to be able to do that. And so you're right. It's certainly not just around Muslims. It's around anyone who feels marginalized because of any aspect of their identity. And so, I think that it really is, it's about, thinking about, what does it mean in terms of the political landscape more broadly. I might have a technical thing that might happen, but I'll jump back on. But, I think it's, really just being able to, how do we exist in this space? The importance of grassroots movement, the importance of community organizing. I don't know if we're thinking that any miracles are going to come. I knew there was going to be something.
Audio. Okay, you're back. Your audio
Okay.
cut off for a second.
So, sorry about that. So, I was going to say, I don't know if we're going to sit around anymore waiting for someone to come save us, Sister Jehan. I don't know if any magical miracles are coming from Washington, D.C., but I think this is an opportunity to rethink power structures. And to, rather than waiting for upon high, for them to be able to come and rescue us with some kind of a miracle. That's, I'm sorry to tell everybody, I don't think that's happening, but I think what we can look to is probably across the nation, across the world, people kind of really starting to mobilize to activate. That's something as well that I think, again, too, this is, has the smaller implications for our community at large. I mean, it was really emotional I will say, being a New Yorker, for, what was happening across social media and what still continues to happen for all these months. That's my mayor around like social media, right? Like everyone is hope. This is like an opportunity, and what it represents is, it is a direct response for what we're experiencing in the world today.
Yeah, thank you so much. For those who are tuning in, we are Arab and Muslim American educators. I'm from California originally, now in Texas. Shireen is in New York, and we're talking about the Mamdani effect. So kind of what has been the vibes on the ground after somebody that is unapologetic about his identity wins in such a big city, and New York has a really big, like really long track record of surveillance and anti-immigrant, anti-Arab, anti-Muslim, anti-insert identity policies that are super brutal. So it is a pivotal moment. So thank you all for tuning in. And as we close, I think we'll close with this question, which is, Shireen, what would you say to young Muslims, your children, or those who feel discouraged or targeted right now? Because while this is a moment of hope and joy, there is an increase of anti-Muslim sentiment. We're seeing it on the news. We're seeing it on the ground. People being violently attacked. So anytime you see Islam or Muslims being kind of like seen or mentioned on the news for whatever reason, you notice that there is a rise in anti-Arab and anti-Muslim sentiment. So, yes, there's hope and joy, but also there are a lot of ignorant people out there who are like, no, we are not going to let you shine. And they're bringing pigs to the mosques and disrupting prayers publicly. So what would you tell young Muslims right now who feel discouraged or targeted?
Even though, we keep bringing it back to Palestine, I think that, something that, I made a connection is, by looking to the role of Palestine in the interconnected struggles for marginalized people, oppressed people around the world, for people who are feeling that they are in danger, that they are not safe, that they are living in fear, that they are living through an injustice, deep, deep injustices. And so I just think, we can look to the Palestinians, we can look to Islam for the concept of sumud, which is like a steadfastness. And I think over the past, 2 to 3 years, we did see a people who were wronged in one of the most brutal ways in the history of man, in the history of humanity. And they continue even still until today to stand firm and to be patient, to have sabr. This is another major concept in Islam. So, I would just say, that, the pendulum does eventually swing. The pendulum does swing, and it's the arc of justice is long, but it bends towards justice. I think that was Dr. Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
And then I have to give a shout out to artists. So yes, we have an important role to play. Rama's art is actually, I think, exclusively, or if not predominantly, political, social justice informed political discourse. And so, what is our role as artists in the resistance, to be able to stand up and to resist and to express? The role of the artist is to make us see ourselves, right? And so we're the ones who give visibility to what is it, we're documenting, we're memorializing it through our art, through our words, through our visual arts, through dance, through performance. And that serves as like a record for us to, to just kind of have this moment and to learn from it. We don't learn from the activity, we learn from reflecting back on it. And so, maybe we're in it right now and it's just too intense, but to have something there where we can really reflect, I think that's something I would advise all of us to just, continue, document, be there, reflect, and move forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Palestine is definitely the litmus test. And Mamdani definitely wins in that aspect. Like that talking point, it's not just a talking point, right? That the humanizing of Palestinians
Mm-hmm.
is unique because we're
Mm-hmm.
living in a time where they are being completely dehumanized, brutalized, and there is a genocide occurring in Palestine, and we
Mm-hmm.
appreciate Mamdani and those others who spoke truth to power. So I would say, young folks, young Muslims and Arabs, I would say that your feelings of being discouraged or targeted, they're valid. Like it's something that we all have felt,
Yep.
and you're not weak for feeling tired because it's exhausting. It's
Mm-hmm.
exhausting to have to wake up every day and be like, okay, like depending on where you work, where you live, you can be a target. And you have to wake up every day and live through that. So we empathize, and it's these are all valid feelings. But I will say that you are part of a lineage of resilience.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
our communities have survived policies meant to erase us, narratives meant to silence us, and systems meant to break us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't owe your silence. You don't owe anyone your silence, I will say,
Mm-hmm.
or your smallness. Like, don't
Mm-hmm.
shrink. Whether you choose to lead loudly
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
resist quietly, you
Mm-hmm.
matter.
Yeah.
And moments like this, even if they're imperfect, because like you said, nobody's going to come to save us. This isn't magic that just happened. Um, they're just like little reminders that the future is it's still being written, and
Mm-hmm.
you as a young person, you have a place in it, and we're rooting for you, wallahi. Like this is the moment. Like I would say just take advantage of this milestone, and we want to see
Mm-hmm.
more Mamdanis, you know what I mean? Like this is, inshallah, it's an effect that means it will reverberate around to communities, and we will see more young Arab and Muslim in power. And yeah,
Inshallah.
that's it.
Thank you so much, Sister Jehan, for having me today. Thank you for, I've had a few little technical issues, but alhamdulillah, we are also resilient, and I look forward to doing more of these. We do have our new Instagram. We have to get that kicked off, but we are the Muslim educators, and I appreciate you so much. Alhamdulillah.
Thank
Jazakallah
you so
khair.
much. Welcome. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and we will be looking to start a podcast here